we are going to dismantle yet another controversial topic in publishing, as we do every week on this program since 2018.
Wow.
And I was being introduced for a speech a few months ago. And in our preparatory meeting, the speaker pulled me aside and was like, how do you feel about, are you okay with hybrid publishing? And I was like, well, is this kind of like asking me if something exists? Because it exists and there's nothing I can do to cease it from existing. And we don't do that, but I'm well aware of it.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Ellie Blue, the Vice President of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we yet again welcome back very special guest to the pod, Jane Friedman of The Hot Sheet.
Can we start with one question, though?
Oh.
I feel like this is always my role on the podcast, just to be the perpetual beginner. But I feel like I maybe thought I once knew what hybrid publishing was, but now I'm sure I have no idea what it is.
Nobody does. Sort of like AI, that people simultaneously feel like they need to have an opinion on, but also desperately are afraid to have the wrong opinion on, because it's evolved a lot over the last 2 decades.
Can we start with Jane? Can you help explain this for the confused among us?
Yeah. It's the definition, I feel like, has shifted over time, and partly I think it's become a marketing term, and it gets applied to a lot of different companies that may or may not be hybrid publishers. So yeah, there's some confusion.
I worked at a coffee shop once, and we had a 12 ounce, a 14 ounce, and a 16 ounce a cup, and people always wanted the medium one. They never wanted small or large. Medium was and I feel like that's maybe what hybrid publishing is it's like, oh, it's something I can get without choosing anything. I don't know.
It's an interesting metaphor. So I'll describe the different perspectives. So if you're a self-publishing author and proud of it, and you're very entrepreneurial, and you've taken a lot of time to understand the publishing industry, if you look at a hybrid publisher, you're probably going to say that's vanity and a scam. Why are you paying thousands of dollars to someone for something you can do yourself? Why are you publishing a book in a way that probably ensures you won't earn a penny off of it? Why are you sharing your royalties with this scam operation? That's how the professional indie author looks at it. If you look at it from someone who is, say, has departed traditional publishing, they're an editor, maybe an agent, someone who used to be on the inside, got really frustrated with the business, which is understandable. You're now going to go start a publisher to publish all those people that should have been traditionally published, but the industry is now shut out. But of course, it's going to be really hard to make money on those books. So you're going to enter some sort of partnership where they're footing the bill for most or all of what's going on. That's hybrid publishing from their perspective. It's like these authors still need assistance. They need help getting into the market. They need help figuring out how to get your copies into the bookstore, into the library. And maybe it's a person who is in a challenging market, like from the perspective of it's not a very good self-publishing market. So like if you're writing literary fiction, women's fiction, memoir, these are areas where, it's kind of hard to be a self-publishing author in those categories and sell lots and lots of copies. Okay, so here's my perspective on it. There are a handful of publishers that meet some definition of hybrid where they're actually providing you something that you would have a really hard time achieving yourself. They're bringing something into the process that I wouldn't call it pixie dust, but some sort of professionalism, some sort of industry effort that does in fact help you with the sales or with whatever your goals happen to be. Every author's goals are going to be different. There are not many of them, though. I could probably count them on one hand, maybe two hands if I'm being generous. And then you've got an untold number of companies who call themselves hybrid because it sounds innovative and it sounds like you're fighting against the man, the traditional publishing industry. And they have kind of been sucked into this idea that it is more prestigious to do than self-publishing. And that's what makes me kind of frustrated with the whole hybrid publishing thing. Because by far the most disappointed authors I meet are not traditionally published, they're not self-published, they are hybrid published, and they didn't really understand what they were signing up for.
Right. That's okay. Thank you. That's great. So, I mean, I remember not necessarily the word, because I think people call it like author services back then.
Mhm.
But I remember like 2007, 2008, when like all the layoffs happened, that so many of those former publishing professionals went into what is now hybrid publishing. And they
Yep.
basically said, like, you hire me, I perform a service, you have a book, it's a professional looking book, I'm trained, experienced.
Right.
And and then they started having a presence at all the conventions and like even at the regionals, and
Yep.
that wasn't really a thing before.
Yes.
Or it was, but like they weren't allowed in those spaces if back when it was called Vanity.
Right.
But the thing that I'm really struggled on is I'm like, what is it a hybrid between? Is it no and self? Like I just can't even follow that. Like, what is the argument there? Do you know?
I think that's nonsense, but they're positioning it as we're bringing you the best of self-publishing, like control over the process, higher royalties, or like better profits, which I would question. And then, but you're getting the cachet or the industry presence of traditional publishing and the professionalism of it. But it's really the worst of both worlds from where I sit. Just at least from a financial perspective, and also to some extent from a career perspective, because of all the paths that you might choose, I find it impossible to sustain a hybrid publishing career unless you have money to burn. Like this is, hybrids talk about, it's about, the freedom and getting the green light. Well, if you have the money, sure, you can have the green light if you can write that $25,000 check, which is really, if you're getting the so-called quality hybrid experience, that's what you're going to end up paying, because you need to print run and you need the marketing support and all the rest of it. And they don't, like, even the base package of hybrid, this I find really infuriating, often doesn't include any editing. You have to go buy that on your own. So you also have these people who think they're getting the professionalism or the cachet of traditional publishing, and they're like, they get to the other side of it and they're like, but I didn't get any editing. Well, you had to go and pay for that, didn't they tell you?
I also feel like giving the author wanting the final say on their cover and development on all of that, like that's not a service to the author.
No.
That's often a disservice to the author.
Exactly.
We have people coming to us more and more frequently. I do the new author onboarding, and I started to have to kind of build in, like, every time I talk to a new author, I have to be like, so we pay you, you don't pay us. And if anyone asks you to pay any money, please don't do that. And if you see negative numbers on your royalty statement, that just means we're waiting to recoup. You do not need to write us a check. And that's just something that's starting to come up really, really regularly, as authors are like having expectations that we are that all publishing is hybrid publishing, or that all press publishing is. And I'm wondering, like, how did that become the norm?
I do not know. Other than just the proliferation of these services and so many of them calling themselves small presses, or we work on a different model, and trying to convince you it's somehow traditional, and it's not.
So how does it not, like, what are your words of warning to authors? Like, how do you know if your publisher is a hybrid publisher or not? And how do you know if it's one of the 5 good ones?
Yeah, it's a problem because I even hear mixed reports from the good ones.
Ooh.
I would say that if you go to a hybrid publisher site or someone that you probably don't want to work with, they're flattering you to the skies, and they're probably going to pressure you a little bit. They're going to make promises they can't possibly keep. You're going to be a bestseller on Amazon in this really niche category. They will, they're probably going to emphasize how you've been chosen to make you feel pretty special. And, you know, traditional publishers, whether it's a small press or a big press, I always say they leave you feeling a little cold. You know, they're not there to massage your ego, and they're probably going to deliver the hard truths. They're not, hopefully they won't be mean about it. But they're not going to sell you a bill of goods. And I feel like hybrids really push the psychological buttons. They know how to make you feel like finally someone has recognized my greatness and will give me the attention that I'm due.
Sounds kind of cult-like.
And but here, sign this contract and fork over $20,000. You know, so as soon as they ask for money, that's the big sign. You're going to have to foot the bill for everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and when the person introducing me asked that question, like my final answer was, I was like, well, it really comes down to like how well the 3-legged stool holds up. Like, does the book offer value to everybody that touches it? Like, is the, you know, like the packaging and the price and the design is probably correct in the development, but like, is it a book that would actually benefit stores? Is it somebody, you know, like, is the reader going to be like, wow, that was a life-changing experience, who does not know the author, who is not familiar, but can like still find benefit through touching the book? And that's sort of where I landed on the matter. And, you know, like, and I, you know, maybe this is old world or middle-aged of me, but like, I don't think of the author being somebody like, you know, the author benefits from the book, but I don't think of the book as being in service to the author. Like, I've always thought of the book as being in service to the reader.
Yes.
You know, and that's certainly taboo in plenty of worlds.
It is.
You know, and people have like gasped at that one, but you know, I guess it's just like kind of an egocentric industry. But so like, you know, what? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know quite how to formulate the question. Like, what, like, hybrid publishing? What? Like, where would you like? How, if you were in a situation with an offer like that, like, is there a case where you would give somebody the tools to like suss that out if that was good for them?
It usually tends to be someone writing nonfiction, like where I think the model can really work for them. They're a CEO. They want to be considered a thought leader. They want a book as a business card. They have a very successful business. They're an entrepreneur. And they want this book as part of the portfolio of various things they do. Because books do still lend authority. And so they want that book. And they don't consider themselves an author, really. They might even be, the hybrid might even be helping them like with the writing, or they'll hire a ghostwriter to get that book out of them, or to find the book. Like, we're going to have to come up with something. You want a book. And they're not expecting necessarily to go on to more projects. This is like a checkbox on their resume, or maybe it's going to help them achieve something, like they're trying to get speaking engagements, or they're trying to get more clients, or they want to raise their rates. Who knows? And they've identified the book as the vehicle. By all means, go spend, you know, what will for them be a small amount on getting that book published. I think hybrids do a fabulous job with that sort of a client. But I just really, my stomach really twists when I see the novelist or the memoirist going down that path.
Right.
Okay. I have a feeling, I have one last question for you. This is maybe a little bit sensitive, but like, I kind of have a feeling that some of the people listening to this podcast may work for or run hybrid publishers and may or may not be fully aware of that and of their role in the ecosystem. Like, do you have advice for how to like push that towards a more ethical direction or a healthier direction?
Transparency about what the company can accomplish, with all of the costs laid out very clearly, which, I think the best hybrids actually, it's totally a proposal quote process because every project's going to be different. So anytime you get into packages, I feel like it's not the greatest. Even though it seems transparent for them to put the packages up on the website, for a great book, you really need to look at its unique needs and also what the author is going to require, like if they need that ghostwriter. So I feel like probably some of my enemies are listening to this because there's a few people in the hybrid community that just follow every single thing I say on this topic, and then I hear about it. Why do I hate hybrids? And I think it's not that I hate the hybrids so much as I hate that authors end up on the other side of it wishing they hadn't done it. And I'm like, the hybrid, I would like them to do a better job of preventing that outcome. They could do a better job of making people aware of what exactly they're walking into and not selling it as some kind of innovation, or this is not an innovation, or that traditional publishing is broken and this is the only way forward. It is not.
Right. I mean, and I guess my hot take is I don't think traditional publishing is broken. Like, I think it's fundamentally fair. And that seems that really raises
that's controversial right there. Woo.
And because I'm like, the author makes more money per unit than the publisher does, not as much as the retailer, but there we are. And but that, and I think about it where a lot that the book, if it's adding value, then the book wouldn't need to be subsidized by the author because, if there's demand, the publisher would be incentivized to invest in it,
Right.
I guess right. Is maybe a less hot take, unless other than to your enemies, but they'll get through this. But so one thing is that I've noticed throughout these interviews, you use indie author as well as self-publisher. Do you differentiate between those things? And do you generally embrace terminology for clarity? Or do you feel like part of your role as, a magnate is that you're sort of challenging that dominant language?
I struggle with this one in particular because authors who self-publish want to be called indie authors, by and large. And I think it's partly they feel like this truly recognizes what they do and who they are. But I also think it causes confusion for people outside the industry who don't understand that indie author is code for self-publishing. And then it also causes confusion inside traditional publishing because small presses like yourself normally you might call it independent publishing, but from self-publishing authors, they call what they do independent publishing.
Yeah.
So it's very frustrating. So I try to be clear with the audience I'm speaking with. So if I'm in a room with self-published authors, I'm more likely to say indie author. If I'm in a traditional publishing context, I'm more likely to say self-publishing author or author who self-publishes. So I try to be a people pleaser, I guess, in that sense. I just want to, but clarity is what I prioritize above that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I have a friend who just grouses whenever self-publishers are put next to small presses because she feels like it just thoroughly takes away all of our credibility. And and I don't feel threatened by it because it's I sort of predate that, but I see the point of view and I see the confusion. We suffer that all the time, as Ellie said, but I guess this is the world we live in now, just like AI.
It's true.
Well, thanks so much.
Thanks for helping us and our readers do it better.
And
My
thanks for
pleasure.
joining us on these episodes. I think it's really going to benefit people.
Jane, where can people find you online? Tell our listeners all the places they should go to find more hot takes by you and cold takes.
Yeah. The best place is janefriedman.com. You'll find my main blog there, as well as links to my paid newsletter, where I tend to be more frank because it's a smaller audience, where not so many enemies show up.
Newsletters, it really has its advantages. It's true.
It does.
Although I imagine there are some people who are willing to pay in order to tell you that you're wrong.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Your service. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.